Human beings have always lived between two longings. On one side, the longing for stability, comfort, and material security. On the other, the longing for meaning, purpose, and spiritual coherence. These two aspirations shape every era of civilization, yet they rarely coexist with ease. Most people spend their lives oscillating between them, as if one cancels the other, as if prosperity and wisdom were rival forces. The dilemma of the modern human being is the same dilemma that troubled souls thousands of years ago. How can one achieve prosperity without losing clarity, dignity, and inner freedom? We belong to a generation that speaks ceaselessly about wealth. Books, courses, ideologies, and strategies promise abundance as if it were merely a formula to be discovered. Yet beneath this noise, the human heart feels a quiet ache. Something in us suspects that prosperity, when not grounded in inner harmony, becomes hollow. We feel the tension between wanting more and fearing that the pursuit may consume what is essential. And because this tension is rarely acknowledged, it becomes a silent conflict shaping many lives in anxious ways. People chase prosperity for reasons they barely examine. Some pursue it out of fear of scarcity, fear of irrelevance, fear of helplessness. Others pursue it out of pride, the desire to display achievement, to gain admiration, or to escape feelings of inadequacy. A few pursue it out of purpose, to build, to uplift, to create stability for those they love. But regardless of the motivation, prosperity has become a race rather than a revelation, a competition rather than a calling. This is where the human dilemma deepens. We know that material success alone cannot bring fulfillment, yet we also know that poverty and disorganization crush the spirit. We know that wealth is not the meaning of life, yet we also know that life becomes difficult when resources are insufficient. The modern world rarely teaches us to unify these truths. Instead, it fragments our understanding, pushing us toward extremes. Either we idealize wealth and lose our inner compass, or we reject wealth and lose our footing in reality. The truth that few acknowledge is that prosperity itself is not the problem. The problem is the inner structure of the person who pursues it. Without preparation of the mind and refinement of the soul, prosperity becomes weight rather than blessing. Wealth magnifies whatever exists within us: clarity or confusion, discipline or chaos, generosity or greed. It reveals the architecture of the inner world with an intensity that few are prepared to confront. This is why many people achieve prosperity only to feel more anxious than before. They discover that abundance does not silence the mind, it amplifies it. It forces a person to face questions they avoided when life was simpler. Who am I without struggle? What will I do with the power that resources give me? How will I use my time when survival is no longer the central preoccupation? These questions disturb the unprepared soul. Maimonides understood this dilemma with extraordinary clarity. Though he lived in a different era, he observed the same pattern in human nature. Individuals who sought wealth without seeking wisdom, individuals who desired abundance without cultivating virtue, individuals who chased external success but neglected the inner life. He saw how prosperity becomes dangerous when it arrives without character, and how character becomes luminous when it is strengthened before success arrives. In his writings, especially in the opening sections of his ethical works, Maimonides describes a universal truth. A person must understand the forces governing the soul before attempting to shape the outer world. Desire is powerful. Imagination is powerful. Emotions are powerful. Without discipline, these forces lead a person into distortion. They turn prosperity into instability. They turn ambition into obsession. They turn comfort into complacency. Thus, the human dilemma is not that prosperity is difficult to obtain, but that it is difficult to sustain wisely. Many achieve, but few understand. Many accumulate, but few grow. Many rise externally, but remain small internally. And because their inner world is unprepared, prosperity becomes a test they fail quietly without noticing the depth of the loss. But beneath this dilemma lies a deeper truth. Prosperity can be a spiritual and rational path when approached with the right foundation. It can elevate, refine, and expand a human being when aligned with purpose. It can strengthen families, communities, and the world when approached with clarity. Prosperity becomes destructive only when it is pursued as an end in itself, when it is pursued as a means to live a life of wisdom, balance, and contribution. It becomes a noble expression of human capability. Maimonides invites us to question all assumptions. What if prosperity is not primarily about wealth, but about order? Not primarily about accumulation, but about alignment? Not primarily about gain, but about growth? These questions challenge the modern mind, which is accustomed to measuring success by external metrics. They force us to reconsider what it means to live well, to flourish, to build a life worthy of the time we are given. The human dilemma becomes an opportunity when approached through the lens of wisdom. We begin to realize that prosperity is not a contradiction to spirituality, but a complement to it, if guided by clarity. We begin to see that abundance can either nourish the soul or suffocate it, depending on the inner structure we bring to it. And we begin to understand that the pursuit of prosperity, when purified of vanity and fear, becomes part of the larger pursuit of truth. Maimonides' rules for prosperity, the ones rarely discussed, emerge precisely from this understanding of the human predicament. They are not external techniques, but inner principles. They teach us to become the kind of person who can hold prosperity without being consumed by it. They transform the pursuit of wealth from a desperate chase into a disciplined journey. They illuminate the path from desire to purpose, from confusion to clarity, from instability to harmony. This is the human dilemma, and this is the beginning of its resolution. To understand prosperity through the eyes of Maimonides, one must first understand how he viewed the human being. He did not see the individual as a mere economic agent or a passive creature shaped by external forces. Instead, he saw a moral, intellectual organism whose flourishing depends on the harmony between character, reason, discipline, and purpose. Wealth, in his thought, is neither condemned nor glorified. It is contextualized. It is placed within the architecture of a well-ordered soul. In the 8 chapters, his ethical introduction to Pirkei Avot, Maimonides teaches the doctrine of the golden mean, the balanced path between destructive extremes. This principle becomes the foundation for any understanding of prosperity. A person dominated by excessive desire for wealth destroys his inner equilibrium. A person indifferent to material needs undermines his stability and becomes a burden to others. Thus, prosperity begins not with acquisition, but with the moderation of desire. It begins with shaping one's inner landscape so that external blessings do not overthrow the soul. A core insight of Maimonides is that character precedes fortune. In Mishneh Torah, he writes that distorted traits lead a person into destructive decisions. Greed blinds judgment. Anger wastes opportunities. Envy poisons relationships. Laziness erodes potential. Impulsiveness obstructs long-term growth. If prosperity is placed in the hands of a person whose character is unrefined, the result is instability. The wealth will not refine the person. The person will deform the wealth. This is one of the hidden rules of prosperity. The moral preparation of the soul determines the fate of one's material life. Another principle emerges from the Guide for the Perplexed. Maimonides insists that the purpose of human existence is the perfection of the intellect, which leads to knowledge of God and alignment with truth. This idea may seem distant from economics, yet it has profound implications for prosperity. When wealth becomes the central aim of life, the soul becomes enslaved to what is beneath it. It loses its higher orientation. It confuses means for ends. Maimonides saw this confusion as a form of idolatry, not the worship of statues, but the worship of imagination, the elevation of temporary pleasures into absolute goals. Thus, prosperity must support intellectual and spiritual development, not replace it. Wealth must serve wisdom, not obscure it. This reorientation transforms the pursuit of prosperity from a restless chase into a purposeful discipline. When the intellect governs desire, prosperity becomes a tool for growth. When desire governs the intellect, prosperity becomes a trap. Maimonides also emphasized rational clarity as essential to human flourishing. In his treatise on logic, he teaches that the mind must learn to distinguish between appearance and reality, between impulse and consequence, between short-term desire and long-term wisdom. Prosperity requires the ability to think clearly. It requires understanding patterns, anticipating outcomes, and recognizing emotional distortions that lead to poor decisions. A person who lacks logical discipline will mismanage resources, misinterpret circumstances, and misjudge opportunities. For Maimonides, clarity is not optional, it is a moral duty. And without clarity, prosperity cannot endure. His medical writings add another dimension to his understanding of prosperity, the importance of physical well-being. In his view, the body is not separate from the soul's pursuit of perfection. It is the vessel through which one fulfills duties, learns wisdom, and performs acts of righteousness. Health, therefore, is not merely a biological matter, it is a spiritual responsibility. He urged moderation in diet, regular movement, emotional balance, and avoidance of harmful habits. A disordered body produces a disordered mind, and a disordered mind produces disordered choices. Prosperity cannot rest upon a fragile or neglected foundation. One of his least discussed principles is the ethical acquisition of wealth. In Mishneh Torah, he writes with precision about the dangers of dishonest gain. Wealth obtained through deceit or exploitation corrodes the soul. It creates internal conflict, for the conscience is never fully at peace with it. Such wealth becomes a burden, not a blessing. On the other hand, wealth earned through integrity produces tranquility. It aligns with the moral structure of the universe. It allows the person to use resources without the weight of guilt or the fear of exposure. This ethical dimension reveals a crucial rule. Prosperity that violates moral order is not prosperity. It is instability disguised as success. Maimonides also teaches that humility is essential for genuine wisdom and lasting prosperity. In the Guide, he emphasizes that human understanding is limited. The universe is vast, and the mind must approach it with reverence. Arrogance blinds judgment and leads to reckless decisions. Humility sharpens intuition, enhances perception, and makes one receptive to learning. In practical terms, this humility protects a person from the dangers of overconfidence, a frequent cause of financial and personal ruin. The humble person does not assume control over forces he cannot command. He studies, evaluates, and adapts. He grows steadily rather than gambling impulsively. Another rarely highlighted element in Maimonides' perspective is the discipline of work itself. He praises craftsmanship, study, and professionalism. He teaches that a person should develop skill, reliability, and excellence in their trade. Prosperity flows naturally to those whose work reflects meticulousness and integrity. He condemns idleness, not because leisure is sinful, but because inertia corrupts the inner world. Work disciplines the mind, stabilizes the emotions, and aligns one with reality. Thus, prosperity is inseparable from consistent, honorable effort. Finally, he emphasizes that prosperity must be integrated into a life of purpose. Wealth isolated from meaning becomes an instrument of anxiety. Wealth connected to service, to family, community, learning, and spiritual growth becomes a source of strength. A person must ask, what is the purpose of my abundance? How does it elevate my life and the lives of others? When prosperity serves a higher purpose, it becomes noble. Without purpose, it becomes noise. Maimonides' perspective reveals prosperity as a moral, intellectual, and spiritual craft. It is not random, it is not chaotic. It emerges when the soul, the mind, and the body are aligned with truth. His rules are not formulas, but foundations. They prepare the person before they prepare the future. They show that prosperity is not achieved only with the hands, but with the whole being. To approach prosperity through Maimonides' eyes is to step into a world where the material and the spiritual are no longer rivals, but reflections of one another. He believed that human flourishing reaches its highest form when the external life mirrors the inner order of the soul. This synthesis is not mystical in the sense of abandoning reason, nor rationalistic in the sense of ignoring the soul. Instead, it is a profound unification of the two, the harmony between understanding and devotion, between intellect and reverence, between worldly responsibility and eternal purpose. In Maimonidean thought, the universe itself is structured by wisdom. Everything reflects order, proportion, and intelligibility. The human being, endowed with reason, is capable of perceiving this order and shaping his life in accordance with it. Prosperity, therefore, is not seen as a supernatural gift, but as a consequence of aligning oneself with the underlying architecture of reality. When a person thinks clearly, acts ethically, and disciplines the passions, he enters into harmony with the design embedded in creation. Abundance, stability, and clarity naturally follow. This is the spiritual core of Maimonides' approach. He does not promise miracles, he promises alignment. He does not speak of sudden financial redemption. He speaks of the moral and intellectual refinement through which prosperity becomes possible and meaningful. At the center of this synthesis lies the intellect. For Maimonides, the intellect is the highest faculty of the human being, the bridge between the finite and the infinite. Through understanding, a person rises above instinct. Through contemplation, he approaches the divine. Through wisdom, he transcends the narrowness of the unexamined life. Prosperity gains significance only when it supports the intellect's ascent, not when it distracts from it. In the Guide for the Perplexed, he writes that the love of God is attained through knowledge. This knowledge is not theoretical alone. It is experiential in the sense that one lives according to truth. When the intellect perceives the order of the universe, the soul feels awe. When the soul feels awe, it becomes humble. When it becomes humble, it becomes receptive to wisdom. And when it is receptive to wisdom, it seeks to live in harmony with the divine order. This harmony has practical consequences. A person who contemplates truth becomes calm. He is not agitated by the constant movement of desire. He is not enslaved by fear of loss or intoxicated by the prospect of gain. His decisions are measured, precise, and rooted in a long view of life. Such a person naturally avoids the self-destructive impulses that often undermine prosperity. His clarity shields him from the emotional storms that lead others astray. His inner equilibrium becomes the foundation of his outer stability. The spiritual synthesis extends beyond intellect into the realm of character. Maimonides believed that virtue is a form of alignment with divine wisdom. Just as the universe operates through balance, so must the human soul. A person whose traits are extreme deviates from the order reflected in creation. One who cultivates moderation participates in that order. When character becomes balanced, the soul becomes clear. When the soul becomes clear, the mind perceives truth. And when truth is perceived, prosperity flows from the life that emerges. In this vision, prosperity becomes a spiritual discipline. The accumulation of wealth is not the central goal. The transformation of the person is. Abundance serves the soul when the soul governs abundance. Prosperity becomes dangerous only when it is divorced from purpose, when it lacks ethical direction, when it stands without the backing of wisdom. Maimonides warns repeatedly that the imagination tends to inflate the value of material things, projecting fantasies onto them. The spiritual task is to strip away illusion and see wealth as it is, a tool, not a truth. Another dimension of this synthesis is gratitude. In his writings, Maimonides describes the contemplative person as one who is deeply aware of the gift of existence. This awareness creates humility, and humility creates gratitude. Prosperity, when accompanied by gratitude, becomes anchored in the soul. It does not inflate pride or generate entitlement. It deepens responsibility. It awakens a desire to use one's resources for good. The grateful person sees prosperity not as something to display, but as something to steward. Gratitude stabilizes prosperity by establishing a moral relationship to it. Maimonides also connects prosperity to service. A life of wisdom is not isolated. It is integrated into the world. When a person refines his mind and character, he becomes capable of contributing meaningfully to others. Prosperity becomes an instrument of justice, compassion, and generosity. It allows one to support family, strengthen community, and uphold ethical principles. In this sense, prosperity becomes a spiritual extension of one's inner order. A person who has cultivated alignment with truth naturally seeks to elevate the world around him. This transformative connection between inner and outer life is central to Maimonides' philosophy. The soul, he believed, shapes its surroundings. A disordered soul produces disorder. A clear soul produces clarity. Prosperity, in this view, is not accidental. It is reflective. The outer world reflects the inner one. When a person cultivates discipline, wisdom, and purpose, life begins to mirror that structure. When a person neglects the inner world, life mirrors that structure as well. The spiritual synthesis also addresses fear. Much of the modern pursuit of prosperity is driven by fear of scarcity. But Maimonides teaches that fear diminishes reason, clouds judgment, and distorts perception. The contemplative person, grounded in trust and understanding, acts from stability rather than panic. He does not cling to wealth as if it were the foundation of existence. He recognizes that the foundation lies in wisdom, virtue, and alignment with truth. This recognition frees him from the anxieties that enslave many. It allows him to pursue prosperity without being consumed by it. Ultimately, Maimonides' spiritual synthesis reveals a profound insight. Prosperity is not a separate domain from the moral and intellectual life. It arises from it. It grows from the same roots that nourish the soul. It is the outer manifestation of inner clarity. When a person aligns with truth, lives with purpose, and disciplines the soul, prosperity becomes not only attainable, but enduring. This is the prosperity that few discuss, the prosperity that begins within, moves outward, and returns inward again, strengthening the entire being. The challenge of applying Maimonides' hidden rules of prosperity to modern life lies not in complexity, but in discipline. His teachings do not belong to the realm of theories detached from daily existence. They were crafted for people navigating the demands, pressures, and uncertainties of real life. The goal is not to imitate his era, but to bring his clarity into ours. Prosperity, in his view, emerges when the soul, mind, and actions move in unified direction. To live this way, one must cultivate specific practices that transform abstract wisdom into concrete stability. The first principle is to moderate desire. Modern life constantly stimulates the imagination, pulling the mind toward fantasies of more, better, faster. Without restraint, desire becomes a fire that consumes judgment. Maimonides teaches that prosperity cannot grow in a soul that is perpetually dissatisfied. To apply this today, one must learn to distinguish between genuine needs and impulsive wants. This requires slowing down, questioning motives, and cultivating the ability to delay gratification. A person who moderates desire does not suppress ambition. He aligns it with purpose. He becomes intentional rather than reactive, deliberate rather than driven by restlessness. This shift alone can prevent countless financial mistakes and emotional missteps. The second principle is the refinement of character. Maimonides writes clearly that distorted traits lead to distorted choices. Anger leads to impulsive decisions. Envy poisons relationships. Pride blinds judgment. Laziness weakens potential. Fear leads to missed opportunities. To apply this teaching, one must observe one's own tendencies with honesty. The goal is not perfection, but correction. A person who works daily to strengthen humility, patience, generosity, discipline, and integrity is building the inner foundation upon which prosperity depends. This refinement is slow and subtle, but its effects are profound, shaping every interaction, every decision, every direction taken in life. The third practical application is the cultivation of clarity through study. Maimonides insisted that the intellect must guide the emotions, not the reverse. Today, this means developing the habit of learning, not only about spirituality or philosophy, but about practical matters such as personal finance, professional skills, human behavior, and long-term planning. Confusion is costly. Ignorance is destabilizing. Clarity is protective. A person who learns consistently becomes resilient, adaptable, and capable of navigating uncertainty. Maimonides would say that wisdom is the highest form of preparation for prosperity because it shapes the quality of every choice. The fourth principle is the care of the body. In his medical treatises, Maimonides warns that neglecting physical health undermines the entire structure of life. Fatigue clouds judgment, illness reduces productivity, poor habits weaken discipline. Modern life often encourages extremes: overwork, overstimulation, irregular routines, all of which harm the body and weaken clarity. To apply Maimonides' teaching is to treat health as a foundation of prosperity. Regular sleep, moderate eating, consistent movement, and emotional balance are not luxuries. They are prerequisites for wisdom and stability. A healthy body supports a calm mind, and a calm mind makes wise decisions. The fifth principle is ethical earning. Prosperity built on dishonesty corrodes the soul. It creates hidden anxieties that follow a person into every area of life. Integrity, on the other hand, creates peace. It allows a person to enjoy what he has without inner conflict. To apply this today means refusing to compromise moral principles for short-term gain. It means choosing honesty even when dishonesty seems easier. It means conducting business, work, and relationships with transparency and fairness. Ethical prosperity is sustainable. Unethical prosperity eventually collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The sixth principle is to live below one's means. Maimonides places great emphasis on moderation in spending. He teaches that a person who spends beyond his capacity becomes enslaved to circumstance. This is as true today as it was in his time. The world encourages consumption, comparison, and excess. But lasting prosperity requires restraint. Living below one's means creates margin, the space that protects a person from crisis and provides opportunities for growth. It allows generosity without fear and investment without anxiety. It transforms financial life from reactive to proactive. The seventh principle is emotional stability. Maimonides writes that the soul must not be ruled by sudden impulses or intense fluctuations. Fear, excitement, and panic distort reality. They lead to decisions that undermine long-term well-being. To apply this teaching is to cultivate equanimity. One must learn to pause before responding, to examine emotions before acting, to question the narratives the mind generates in moments of intensity. A stable emotional life produces stable prosperity. A turbulent emotional life produces turbulent outcomes. The eighth principle is organization. He believed deeply in order. Order in thought, order in conduct, order in routine. Modern life is filled with distractions that scatter attention and erode focus. To apply Maimonides' rule is to structure one's time, create priorities, develop consistent habits, and reduce chaos. Productivity grows in order. Clarity grows in order. Prosperity grows in order. Even small acts of organization reflect the larger commitment to living intentionally. The ninth principle is contemplation. Maimonides describes the contemplative life as one in which a person regularly examines his motives, choices, and direction. Without reflection, prosperity becomes empty and purpose becomes distant. In the modern world, contemplation means creating spaces of silence, moments to evaluate progress, question assumptions, reconnect with values, and realign intentions. Reflection transforms the pursuit of prosperity from instinctive to conscious. It awakens gratitude, humility, and purpose. The final principle is anchoring prosperity in meaning. For Maimonides, wealth is never an end. It is a means toward a greater life, a life of wisdom, virtue, family, community, and spiritual understanding. Prosperity unconnected to purpose becomes noise. Connected to purpose, it becomes strength. To apply this today is to ask, how will my prosperity serve something greater than myself? How will it contribute to the world? How will it elevate my soul? Purpose transforms prosperity from accumulation into contribution. It gives weight, direction, and dignity to material success. When these principles converge, moderation, character, clarity, health, integrity, discipline, stability, order, contemplation, and purpose, prosperity becomes the natural extension of a well-ordered soul. It grows not through frantic pursuit, but through alignment with truth. It becomes lasting, meaningful, and deeply human. This is the prosperity Maimonides teaches, the prosperity that begins within, takes shape outwardly, and returns to elevate the inner life again.